to this, the third of our 17 lectures of our 2021 Engineers Ireland Sustainability Grand Tour lecture series, which is a collaboration between our West, Southeast, Cork, Northern, Midlands, GB and Northeast regions, the Energy, Environment and Climate Action Division, and our Roads and Transportation and academic societies. These lectures run between January and April, so please keep an eye on your social media feed for constant updates. Today we are the guests of the GB Regional Branch. The GB region is a hub for members based in mainland UK, representing all sectors of the industry, providing local CPD and networking events for engineers. And I'm very happy now to introduce you to one of the pillars of the GB Region Committee, Mr. Con Kelleher, Chartered Engineer. Con, can I ask you now to open today's event?
Yeah, thanks, John, and welcome to everyone today to our talk on transitioning our homes to low carbon. It is, I suppose, one of the few positives of this pandemic that we can get together, all the regions of Ireland and the GB region, to share our experience and expertise on such an important subject as sustainability, looking at projects from inception to design, construction, the life of the building, and finally to its end life. And the goal here is to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050, which is a big ask for us all. Engineers, I think, have a very important role to play in this, and it is our advantage that our institute represents all the disciplines of engineering, and all of them are needed to achieve this goal. Research here shows us that our homes use up to 30% of the nation's energy and emit up to 20% of the greenhouse gases. To get to zero emissions will take a lot of effort, both personally and collectively. So to introduce today our speaker, Brian, has been with the ESB for 30 years since graduating from University College Dublin as an electronic engineer, and has since been awarded an MSc Leadership and Business Practice from UCD Smurfit Graduate Business School. He has held numerous technical projects and senior management positions across the ESB group, including Corporate Communications Manager and Retail Energy Trading and Regulations Manager. Currently with the ESB Strategy, Innovation and Transformation Directorate, he is leading work on a key pillar of ESB strategy, the decarbonisation of heat. And I say before Brian starts that our chairman, Philip Ray, will field your questions after this discussion. And can I ask you to put these into the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen? So I'm delighted to welcome today Brian Montayne.
Thank you, Con. Hopefully you can hear me, and I'm just going to share my screen now, and hopefully you don't have any technical challenges. You might just confirm that that is visible there, Maureen.
Yeah.
Great, Con. Thank you very much. And particular thanks to Con who reached out to some former schoolmates of him to get myself involved in this. Delighted to be doing it. I'm sitting in my home in Dublin, and I hope that, as I said, the technical issues don't muddy the waters here. But there's 6 of us in this house at the minute working and doing homeschooling, so I'm sure like a lot of you, so there are challenges at times, but fingers crossed we'll get through today. As Con mentioned in my introduction, almost 30 years, sorry, beyond 30 years now. Last September was my 30th anniversary with ESB, and I've spent a lot of time through various business units. And currently, you know, seeing very, very significant changes in the organization in terms of the challenges that we're facing. Interesting. Just to look back, when we look back to 1927, 28, when ESB was first established, and we reflect on kind of mission that the company set itself at the time, it isn't hugely different we're facing right now in terms of the climate challenge that we face across our business and globally across all sectors, in fact. So I think it's interesting just to reflect back and say, look, to remind ourselves of what ESB was about at the time and what its strategic objectives are right now. I'm sure many of you know about ESB, but unfortunately, you can't avoid the bit of PR at the start. But as an organisation, we have a lot of activities across Ireland and UK, particularly in the generation area. As you probably well know, we own the networks, the transmission and distribution networks in Northern Ireland through NIE networks and in the Republic of Ireland through ESB. And obviously we have supply businesses in both the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland and in the UK in the last couple of years in a company called ESB Energy. Not a big player yet. I think our customer count is around 100,000 customers, but obviously making progress in what is a very, very challenging electricity retail market. We also have businesses in EV development, the development of EV charging infrastructure in London in particular for London taxis. We also have projects going on in Birmingham, Manchester as well. And then we also have a smart energy services business which engages with industrial and commercial customers to develop energy efficiency projects and flexibility projects such as large-scale batteries, etc. So quite active in what we call our home market in Ireland and the UK. So just to touch a bit on, before I get into kind of our strategy and the meat of the presentations were around homes. But so when we look at the nature of energy trends over the last number of years, some very, very significant develops in terms of decarbonisation in particular, having a clear path around an ambition out to 2050. Again, the path and the journey is somewhat uncertain, and obviously progress is subject of ongoing challenge in terms of what we have achieved since Paris in particular, but certainly in an Irish context and in recent weeks in particular with the 6th carbon budget in the UK, there's very clear direction being set now and ambition, but obviously a lot of that requires significant challenges and industry engagement and most importantly citizen engagement to achieve it. And what's driving, the opportunity, particularly for electricity, is around the nature of the renewables effectively have become very cost effective in terms of when you consider going back to the 1990s when this started, certainly in an Irish context, the reduction in costs to deploy megawatts of renewables has been significant. It's also been seen in the costs of solar panels, and has also been seen in the context of offshore wind, which is something that hasn't taken a grip in an Irish context yet. Certainly in the UK, it's a major industry, and we're going to see developments in waters very, very soon. We're also, from an industry perspective, we're seeing significant reduction in demand through building standards, energy efficiency, LED lighting. So as an electricity business, there's significant challenges to our kind of traditional consumption base, as it were. Obviously, then we add into that distributed generation, solar panels, batteries, lots of other impacts on our energy and our electricity supply business, and more broadly having impact on the generation and the networks businesses in terms of potentially less flow of units through the networks does present challenges. In an Irish context, there is a significant offset there, just to mention, around data centres. It is a subject of some debate, the impact that data centres are having on our energy system, but obviously, and it's area there is obviously opportunity there for us, and there's opportunity too with data centres in terms of how we integrate them into our energy system, in particular in relation to waste heat, etc. We touched on the prosumer, effectively a lot more engaged citizens in terms of the energy systems. They're far a lot less passive now. A lot more people, what they call proactive with the energy system through the deployment of connected home technology, through solar on the roof, electric vehicles, etc. So a lot going on in that space. And then finally, I suppose business models. So a lot of challengers out there, a lot of new entrants into the energy industry. The kind of movement away from selling units of electricity to selling services, energy services, and how all those, how we bundle up our offerings to customers, and how we develop propositions that create, as I say, more engagement with the product that we provide. And obviously, a lot of the telecoms market is a good example of that, where effectively you get what they call free phone usage, all the minutes you can eat and all the data you can eat for a fixed fee. So there's lots of challenges to the traditional kind of electricity model that we have to look at and respond to. So in terms of ESB strategy is a very simple representation of ESB strategy. It's a lot deeper detail available for those who are interested on ESB's website. But obviously, we focus on our core markets. I've mentioned Ireland, the UK, the development of smart, reliable networks that will facilitate increased penetration of low carbon generation, and all of that rolling into delivering on Ireland's climate action plan. ESB, as you probably know, is 95% owned by the Irish government. So we are fully committed and aligned with the strategic objectives of Ireland's climate action plan. And you can see there that the numbers are staggering from an Irish context. I appreciate the UK has a far bigger population of people, cars, homes, etc. I think it could be at least 8 to 10 times greater than ours. But from an Irish context, very significant ambitions around the deployment of electric vehicles, and in terms of the deployment of electric heat pumps in particular into our housing stock. The 600,000 there we represent roughly about a third of our occupied premises. We have 2,000 dwellings in total, but permanently occupied dwellings is about 1.6 to 1.7 million. So that's where ESB are at. And then when we look at the picture in terms of carbon emissions, and Con alluded to this at the outset, that we see the contribution that the various sectors of heat, transport, electricity generation, agriculture make to our carbon emissions. Our carbon emissions come to about 60 million tonnes. I think that the number in the UK is 480 million to 500 million tonnes. So big differences in scale here. But obviously we have agriculture, which is a very significantly different in terms of the contribution it makes us to carbon emissions in Ireland than other nations across Europe. So you can see the bottom left there, just the difference, how different we are when it comes to agriculture. So obviously our electricity generation has seen significant reductions in carbon over the last 30 years, and I'll show something of that shortly. But clearly, if the key sectors for us to decarbonise, to achieve the ambitions of our government's plans, is around heat and transport. There is heat also included in what we call the energy trading scheme sector, which is, I probably won't go into much detail around today, but there are significant opportunities within that sector too, for electrification, but also obviously for hydrogen, which is receiving a lot of attention in recent years. So, as I say, that's the picture in Ireland. And just in terms of carbon intensity, you can see that since 1990, almost a 2/3 reduction in the carbon intensity of electricity in Ireland, down to 325 grams. Acknowledging again that in the UK sense, the latest figure I could find, published figure that I could find, was 256 in the UK. Now these are average figures over the year. So, but you can see that in the context of the ambition, where we're to achieve 70% renewable penetration in Ireland by 2030. A decade isn't a long time in terms of electricity infrastructure, as you all know. So we also seen in the last couple of weeks, just before Christmas there, 2 of our Midlands peat plants came off the bars. So again, that will have a significant impact in the data for the years from 2021 and beyond. And obviously, and Montayne as well, our coal plant, has seen significant reductions in its generation contribution over the last number of years. But obviously there are significant challenges with all of these closures, and creating flexibility to respond to the ever increasing amount of non-synchronous generation on the system has been managed extremely well so far, it must be said. But there are challenges as we drive deeper into decarbonised electricity generation. So huge progress has been made. A good distance to go, certainly from electricity, but you can see very much that electricity has been carrying most of the burden of decarbonisation of the energy system over the last 30 years. And in fact, the price of electricity has been carrying that burden through public service obligations for renewables, and for also, it must be said, for peat as well, which was an indigenous fuel source going back obviously over the decades. Developments there in the context of security of supply and security of fuel supplies in particular, because we are in an Irish context highly dependent on imported fossil fuels. So as I say, huge progress, the way to go, but certainly the trajectory and the performance today would suggest electricity can achieve the scale of decarbonisation that's been suggested there in that graph, down to below 100 grams per kilowatt hour by 2050. In that context, that's where we see the contribution that electricity can make. If you've got a fuel that is in the range of 50 to 100 grams per kilowatt hour, compared to other fossil fuels like gas and oil were over 200, and you combine that fuel then with very energy efficient technologies such as electric vehicles and through heat pumps, that the contribution will be very significant. So absolutely, from our perspective, we see a massive role for heat pumps and electric vehicles, and it's underpinned within the Climate Action Plan now. That's not to say that use of electricity through heat pumps or EVs is the only vector that will be used. As I mentioned earlier, the hydrogens and biogas and other fuels, decarbonised fuels, will certainly have a place. But when it comes to the home, it's certainly our version that the predominant technologies when it comes to home, residential car use and residential heating, it'll come down to electric vehicles and heat pumps largely. But there will be some exceptions to that. Biomass also will have a role to play in the domestic sector to some degree, as it does already. So, and obviously, when we talk about the efficiency of heat pumps, I think it's important. I mean, just to call the elephant in the room out. I mean, there's a lot of challenge and a lot of discussion around the actual efficiency of heat pumps in particular. I think it's well accepted that the efficiency levels that can be achieved in EVs, but when it comes to heat pumps, there is evidence, and there's been reports in the past, in the UK in particular, through the Carbon Savings Trust, where the RHI was launched back in maybe 2014, I think it could even been earlier, where some relatively poor performing installations were examined. But if we look at data across Europe in terms of what's going on and the transition we've seen in terms of the performance of the technology, which doesn't just come down to the technology itself, it comes down to the environment in which the technology is installed, and it comes down to the appropriate commissioning and installation of the technology. You can see that you're achieving, certainly in Fraunhofer in Germany, has seen performances, averaging performances growing from about 2.6 up to 3.9 there you can see. 2.6 to 2.9 up to 3.2 for air source heat pumps. Obviously ground source heat pumps do offer greater performance factors, but again, there's a significant capital difference in the cost for installation. And then laterally, we were involved ourselves in a project deploying heat pumps into existing dwellings that were retrofitted, improved insulation, improved ventilation, air tightness, etc. And even when well installed heat pumps that had originally achieved kind of SPFs of about 3.2, further commissioning and review and optimization of the system in the home drove out even more improvements. Particularly, you can see there, raising space heating up to 3.4 and domestic hot water up to 2.4. So absolutely, the technology can deliver the type of efficiencies that are being presented by manufacturers. But we've seen it, and we've done live testing ourselves on that. And if we look then at going back to the greenhouse gas emissions, and we did talk about the scale of the UK challenge as opposed to Ireland's challenge, but you can see they're very similar. Buildings is contributing relatively similar kind of numbers to the overall carbon emissions inventory. So about up to 15% and more when you include industrial heat, etc. Sorry, this is just buildings. Sorry. So in terms of buildings, the 15% comparison is quite close to the UK situation. And you can obviously see there on the right, these are extracts from the CCC's sixth carbon budget. You can see the reduction there in consumption from buildings. Again, some of that is down to energy efficiency. Some of it down is due to economic circumstances. There's probably blips there over the period of the last 10 years where there have been challenges. So, but the trend is down, but again, it's flattened, as you can see there in the latter years out to 2018, 2019. So, and a big way to go to achieve, zero carbon or anything near that. So, very similar challenges we share. And the other thing to bear in mind is what are we doing now? So every new building we introduce into the stock, be that commercial buildings or housing, homes or apartments, etc. Every dwelling that uses, fossil fuel based technologies, rather than taking advantage of low carbon options at the moment, is more carbon into the already overflowing bath of carbon for as an analogy. So we need to be sure that our existing homes we have a significant challenge, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But every new home we build, we should ensure that we have future-proofed it. As I say, I'll come to how that could be brought about and what's been happening in the Irish context, and reflect a bit on what I see from the sixth carbon budget. So there's significant growth and demands going to be placed on our system. So it's not a static problem. We have significant inflation of our carbon challenge in front of us if we don't deal with it right now. So time is of the essence. In an Irish context, then, just looking at one really important thing to highlight here from a big difference from the UK and ourselves is just the scale of oil and solid fuel in particular. If you look at oil and solid fuel, 54% of this is based on data from our Central Statistics Office, 2016 data, probably hasn't changed an awful lot. And this is just occupied homes. So just in case anybody listening in from Ireland is challenging the numbers, these are based on occupied homes on the night of the census. So you can see how significant a challenge we have when it comes to heavy carbon intensive fuels, in particular oil and solid fuel, and the consequences of those particular fuel types isn't just carbon. It's NOx and SOx. It's health and well-being. Having very significant impacts on our citizens. So very, very large challenge. Electricity, most electricity that's highlighted there is storage heating. And again, storage heating has got a bad rep over the years. It's not the most efficient use of electricity. I mean, using direct electricity on a one-for-one basis into a storage heater. But obviously, it's a technology that is out there. So we need to find ways to address that. And obviously, gas homes as well. While gas has lower carbon intensity than electricity at the moment, certainly, and oil and solid fuel. The time to address the carbon intensity of gas will be challenging in terms of when we reflect back on how long it's taken us to get 2/3 of the carbon out of electricity. The kind of timelines involved in actually seeing gas carbon intensities reducing sufficiently to continue to be used. It's certainly in domestic and commercial buildings. It's a challenging issue. So, but one that I know it's much debate and discussion, and particularly in the UK, more so than here, because say almost half of our country, the north half of our of our country doesn't have access to mains gas, to natural gas. So there is an opportunity there in that context to be able to get at those homes to transition them to low carbon options. And then obviously the biggest, not alone is it about the heating system, it's about the environment in which that heating system is working. And the EPC and the building energy rating systems that we use here are quite similar. Again, the direct translation, you have just A, B, C, D's, E's, and F's. Sorry, we have A's, 1s, 2s, 3s, B's, 1s, 2s, 3s. So you can see, so it's quite a bit of, and hard to see on the slide there, but it just shows you basically the primary energy per square meter per annum. So it's in kilowatt hours per annum for dwellings that fall into those various bands. But the message here clearly is that when we look at the majority of our homes are well outside, what's considered an optimum building energy rating, which we've set at B2. Obviously, the newer homes are all hitting A3, A2 typically, but certainly B2 being a kind of an optimum performance level to achieve, to be able to then engage with changing out heating systems. So a huge challenge facing us in terms of the performance of our current building stock. And just if we look at the summary, just the middle, the third bar there shows you where it's not as segregated as the chart I showed you there for Ireland, but you can see that anything outside of C there, you've got 60 to 70% of your homes are not performing to the level that one would expect, or that would create a comfortable, healthy environment for the dwellers of those homes. So similar challenges in terms of the housing stock, and that it is not just about Ireland, UK. Across Europe, there is a recognition that the building needs significant renovation to achieve the type of scale of energy efficiency improvement primarily, but then to be able to facilitate deeper decarbonisation of those dwellings. So this is a European-wide challenge. The EU launched the renovation wave last year. So again, significant political recognition for the challenge and the opportunity that exists to be able to address the energy efficiency of our homes, coupled with transition then to low carbon heating sources. So when we just going back to the Ireland's Climate Action Plan, a little bit more detail in here, some of which will be relevant, some less so. We mentioned heat pumps being central to decarbonisation. We're planning to install 600,000 by 2030. Of that 600,000, 200,000 approximately will be in new builds. So the idea being that we'll be building approximately 20 to 25,000 houses per annum. So over the decade, we'd hope to see the vast majority of those homes transitioning, deploying low carbon heating systems, predominantly heat pumps, over the next 10 years and beyond. In the simultaneously, they've called out a ban, as what was described as in the Climate Action Plan, on oil and gas boilers being installed into new homes, oil by 2022, gas by 2025. The reality here is that oil is, and I think similar in the UK, oil is not a huge factor now in terms of new build. But gas obviously does continue to be installed as we talk. And we have our assertion that we need to challenge that the 2025 date. That's 5 more years. That's potentially another 100,000 homes that may be adopting gas boilers that may well and will have to be replaced if we're serious about achieving our ambitions. So why not make that change now and mandate a low carbon technology earlier than that? Again, that'll be dealt with through the building regulations, which will be due for review, I'm sure, again very soon. That the last I'll cover them a bit here. 2019 was when the most recent dwellings building regulations, Part L, were reviewed. So I also mentioned there major renovations. So it was currently, for the first time within the building regulations, now there's a minimum BER requirement where an existing dwelling undergoes works that would impact on about 25% of its surface area. But even at that, the B2, achieving the B2 would still permit the deployment of a gas boiler into that home. So again, looking at that's the appropriate way to address the kind of challenge we have. Obviously recognizing the context of the costs that are involved in people doing renovations to their homes. So it's not an easy issue to address from a cost point of view, but there are far more, there are far wider societal benefits through, creating low carbon homes and in particular health. So the scale of positive impact that could have is something that we need to take into consideration as well. The next one is very much Irish specific around a retrofit task force. So again, when we talk about renovation of homes, advice and people being guided in the correct way, homeowners being given access to independent, reliable advice on the best way to transition their homes to low carbon needs to be put in place. The market is very fragmented in that area here in particular, and I'm sure it's probably the same in the UK. So obviously creating a delivery body, when we talk about delivering 600,000 renovations, 500,000 renovations by 2030, that's a significant undertaking, and it's going to need a program delivery body, and that has been established already within the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. So that is already in place, and we also need to look at financing. How will our citizens access low interest finance, or what other mechanisms are there to improve the business case, for want of a better word, for the homeowner in terms of investing in their home to the scale that's required. And I'll touch a bit on numbers now in a second. We also, I know CRU is our Commission for Regulation of Utilities. Pay as you save, and the Green Deal, I know wasn't a huge success, as I understand, in the UK. So how we would deploy, and pay as you save maybe there may be other ways to engage and to create access to funding, in some ways maybe attaching the cost of the upgrades directly to the property itself rather than to the individual. So there are models out there across the world where that have been deployed to try and incentivize and stimulate homeowners to engage in renovations. So that's being looked at as well. And obviously there's another big issue for ESB for its supply business is what we call the Energy Efficiency Obligation Scheme, which places particular targets on us as a business to achieve energy savings, and that it's likely that's going to be reviewed, that particular program, in 2021, and it's quite likely that they're going to put a lot more pressure and responsibility on all energy suppliers to bring about the sort of decarbonisation and renovation targets that are being presented in the Climate Action Plan. So, and in fact, they've also made a significant change where they're now dealing with end use final energy demand as opposed to primary energy demand. And I'm sure it's as many of you know that there's a kind of a primary energy factor applied to electricity when they talk about the full life cycle of electricity generation. But again, they're now looking at, well, look, in reality, what is it that is used in the home, and that final demand is considered really what we're trying to reduce, on the basis that there are other supporting developments in decarbonisation of the fuels that are being used. And also not to ignore district heating. Again, the UK is, I'd say, a lot more advanced in terms of district heating than we are here. We've some very small schemes in place across the country, and we are looking at one significant scheme that's in planning for Dublin, which is going to take advantage of a waste, an incinerator in the Bay, Dublin Bay. So again, a lot of work to be done there to develop and deploy the infrastructure to support that. So, but certainly, district heating does have the potential to make a significant contribution in large and medium-sized urban areas. But obviously, there are significant policy and financing challenges to doing that. So, and within that context, you would see, the potential for, that waste heat would be a significant contributor Equally, electricity could be, through generation assets, or equally through heat pumps, and equally, the use of hydrogen and other sources to create a deeply integrated energy system that would support decarbonisation of major urban areas. So when we look at just in terms of the carbon budget, just as a comparison, you can see, maybe not very clearly just in terms of this slide, but the depth to which the deployment of residential low carbon heating networks and residential building scale low carbon heat is going to make the decarbonisation of the building sector in the UK. So very, very significant chunk of what needs to be achieved to achieve net zero is in those, both in the deployment of heat pumps, and you can see to the right the scale of heat pump deployment that's envisaged in the UK is astronomical. I mean, 25 million plus heat pumps deployed out to 2050. I mean, it's a staggering number. But again, in the context of the relevance, even in relative terms for us, that's a big number. So we've, as I said, 1.8 million, roughly 1.7 million homes. We may have another 500,000 homes built by 2050. So the scale of what you need to achieve is tenfold in the UK compared to ourselves. And obviously that creates issues around supply chain and how we can deploy that. Certainly, and one issue, I suppose, one difference that I've seen, certainly in the UK, in terms of the deployment of heat pumps in existing homes through the renewable heat incentive, has been that there's, that hasn't been associated. The deployment of the heat pump has not been associated. Our biomass boiler has not been associated then with a significant improvement in the energy efficiency of the home. Quite different over here, where any funding, any grants require a minimum performance of the dwelling before a heat pump in particular can be deployed. So there, again, the depth of renovation, the depth of measures required to achieve that will vary from house to house. And obviously, it's something that in the UK context, I think it's important that to ensure that we achieve the type of decarbonisation potential that we need to look at the energy efficiency of the dwellings. And it is noted here, but the scale of contribution looks relatively small there in a UK context. We would see certainly the potential for about 30% savings in a home through energy efficiency, and then a further 45 to 50% being achieved through the deployment of a heat pump in particular. So, but look, challenges are very similar. Just the scale is somewhat different compared to ourselves. And then, so looking at new homes, the improvement and as the reason that heat pump deployment has increased in Ireland in particular. Obviously in the UK, the RHI had a significant impact on the deployment into existing homes. In Ireland here, the increased deployment of heat pumps has been into new homes, and that's been driven by the development of our NZ standard, which, as I mentioned, was introduced in 2019. And you can see the benchmark reductions there over the various iterations of the building regulations, in particular, from 2005 through to 2019, and significant improvement in primary energy in our homes. And a typical home now, as I said, is meeting an A2 standard. But as I say, that as the building regs are like in the UK, are technology agnostic. You can deploy technically an oil boiler, a gas boiler, or a heat pump. But in order to do that, the gas boiler will require you to install an alternative renewable technology. In the case of what's happening over here, is solar PV is the predominant technology that's deployed. Solar thermal in some instances. But the latest iteration, the Part L in 2019, has seen a significant shift across to heat pumps, driven by the fact that it's more or less cost neutral for the developer, and ultimately it's the developer makes the decisions around what he's building. Certainly up to now, I think going forward, I think there will be more demand from our citizens to deploy low carbon, future-proof solutions for them. As I say, there is cost neutrality. There is the benefit then of zero local emissions. So in the home, There are no emissions, far more healthier environment. And heat pumps are offering about 40% carbon savings, so deeper. So if, applying the 300% efficiency of a heat pump with, to the current carbon intensity of electricity, where you get 2 units of heat for every 1 unit of electricity that you use in the house, it's very significant from a carbon perspective. Although, so effectively you're beating the carbon target that is deployed within the building regulations. And I'll show you the numbers now in terms of deployment and scale over the last couple of years. And obviously, that assuming that homeowners use electricity smartly in the context of what we call day-night metering, lower day rates to night rates. So using night rates to heat your hot water, only using, minimizing your use of day rates, in the context of particularly in terms of your summer usage, you can see 15% running costs reduction. Again, and that's right now today, but looking out into the introduction of and the scaling up of carbon taxes on fossil fuels, will see a growing differential between the cost of running a house on electricity and the cost of running it on fossil fuels. And I'll see smart metering also is being deployed here, and I know it's ongoing in the UK also. That will provide the opportunity for the suppliers to offer more dynamic tariffs that would reflect hopefully better in terms of the carbon intensity of electricity at various times of the day, etc. So there's scope there to introduce those types of tariffs that will realize deeper savings for the homeowner. As I just mentioned there, that again, the numbers and the scale are very small compared to the UK. It's probably, I think the UK in terms of the RHI has seen about 40,000 heat pumps deployed over 6 years. So you can see this is last year we had about 8,000 heat pumps installed. Now these are only homes that are actually registered on our BER, the Building Energy Rating database. There is another cohort of homes out there that are built, called one-off homes, that are built by the occupiers, and they're not required to actually provide to register BERs necessarily currently. I think that will change. So it's even though our CSO would have advised that there's about 18,000 to 20,000 houses were built in 2020. There are gaps in the numbers in terms of what's being registered in terms of energy, but anecdotally we would know that heat pumps have a very strong foothold in the one-off space as well. So you can see 70% growth since 2015. Growth to 70% deployment of heat pumps in new dwellings from a position of about 25% back in 2015, and all of that driven, in fairness, by the building regulations and setting higher energy efficiency, carbon efficiency, and renewable energy targets for through the building regulations. And again, the Future Home Standard. I know there was consultation last year. There was a document issued in the last week or so with the outputs from that consultation. But clearly, the UK have indicated that they're very much minded to drive towards the deeper decarbonisation, very similar to the type of standard that we have achieved in Ireland since 2019. And if you just look at on the left-hand side there, just as a matter of kind of just comparison, that Ireland's building regulations currently are rated extremely, very highly by the Global Buildings Performance Network in terms of how they apply, in particular the area of renewables and energy efficiency. So the UK is not far behind. I think that's just England and Wales rather than anywhere else, as far as I can gather from that data. But you can see that there is, what's been set out within the Future Home Standard would suggest a drive closer, aligned with the kind of standard that we're deploying currently in Ireland. So, and again, I think a technology agnostic approach has been proposed within the Future Home Standard as well. But just to bear in mind, I think the importance that ensuring that the type of numbers that are being suggested for heat pumps are realised, and a lot of that will come down ultimately to the choice of the developer. But there is still the scope to be continued to be developing and to introducing further more carbon intensive dwellings into our housing stock. Now, acknowledging, of course, that in due course, certain districts I think have been identified for district heating and for the deployment of hydrogen clusters and decarbonisation of the gas grid. But if we talk only about blending of the gas grid, we will not achieve the type of decarbonisation. We will not realise the type of decarbonisation we're looking for unless we achieve what is proposed within the both our climate action plan and your future home standard and the carbon budget. Just very quickly, conscious of time, to give some time for questions. Just a new build, existing homes, we touched on it a fair bit. I mean, Ireland is a big outlier in terms of CO2 emitted from their homes. The one thing to focus on, the cost of retrofit, as we apply it here through improvements required to achieve a minimum B2 and even higher in some cases, it's not an inexpensive activity for the homeowner. So while there are very generous grants of about 35% available for those works, there's still a big financing gap there to be filled. So there are challenges ensuring that we can achieve, provide customers with choices in regard to financing, and that might be low interest rate loans. It might be reductions in property tax associated with the building energy rating. And there are other, as I mentioned earlier, there are other ways by which that could be facilitated. And there's a lot of work going on within our Department of Environment and Climate Change currently around this area. But what's interesting, as I say, just a consequence of the shift to heat pumps in the new build scenario has seen a lower deployment then of solar panels on new homes. So in reality, a home that has a heat pump is probably a better fit for solar PV in terms of self-consumption than would be a house with a gas or oil boiler. And in retrofit, in many cases, solar is deployed as part of that renovation. Again, very much dependent on the incremental improvement that's needed in the home, or in fact the customer's desire to spend money and to invest further in additional electricity renewable energy technologies. And obviously batteries on top of that is something that has arisen in some cases. Relatively few, I think, at this stage, due to the economics, the challenges of the economics around solar and battery, and particularly in Ireland, where we currently we don't have a feed-in tariff for spill from domestic solar. There is a consultation ongoing, and the intention is there will be one later in 2021. But as things stand, that doesn't exist. And I suppose kind of my concluding slide really is around so what we're currently seeing in terms of new homes and existing homes is very much the deployment of heat pumps in new build, solar sometimes with that, solar sometimes on renovations. But as we look forward, we obviously now need to consider the wider implications of the electrification of transport as well in terms of home charging. So again, building regulations are under review. It hasn't quite been concluded yet, where there will be a requirement to make provision for home charging in new dwellings. I know that some local authorities already included as part of their requirements for planning, in apartments in particular, requiring a certain percentage of parking spaces within the parking areas of apartments to be ready for EV charging. We also then consider the integration, as I've mentioned, around gas, electricity and heat, and how all that will come together through district heating networks, but also through the deployment of battery vehicle to grid technology emerging in time, and obviously the home having its personal battery also alternatively. So there's going to be significant deep sector coupling arising over the next couple of decades. We're at the very early stages of that, lots of projects going on, lots of technology development happening around the world in this area. But right now we don't, you don't see much of it if you go into a new home. But that landscape will change significantly over the next decades. And so my final slide is saying that, look, when we consider what we're trying to achieve, it is about providing healthy living environments for us all. I think we've all become very aware of our comfort levels within our homes unfortunately over the last almost a year living at home. I was lucky enough that I had done a retrofit to my house back in 2015. So lucky that I have a warm, comfortable home to work in. I know plenty of my neighbours, talking about the challenges they're having when they're in a place all day, in terms of both the cost of running the house and just the general comfort levels. So, and you also need to think about the health, the health and well-being of ourselves and our children, the benefits that can be brought through, decarbonised, fuel sources, zero emissions homes, etc., is the way to go. So with that, look, I'll conclude, and I'm sorry if I went on a bit longer than I intended, but I'm happy to take as many questions as you can fit in.